been on this chronic for all my life. I'm so gone. I've been thinking about that chronic, it got a nigga obsessed. All I can do is think about it and putting it in my chest. Feeling it in my lungs, that chronic, it got me sprung. Keeping me feeling numb, been smoking since I was young. Living the high life, get your mind right. Give me the light so I can ignite this hydro and take flight. I swear, ain't no better feeling than your first hit. Puff, puff, pass, man, I wrote this blunt perfect. Eyes bloodshot.
Oh, yeah. You're listening to Cannabis Corner on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, broadcasting live from downtown New Haven. We are streaming live on TuneIn Radio and NewHavenIndependent.org. We are also streaming live video on Facebook and YouTube. Just go to your Facebook page and look us up, or hit see first to hear and see all the great programs that we have here on WNHHLP. Cannabis Corner is also streaming live on the Greenhaven Media Facebook page and procannabismedia.com. Welcome. It is Monday, January 15th, 2024, MLK Day. Welcome to Cannabis Corner. I'm your host, Joe LaChance. I am joined here today on this lovely day by my co-host, Uncle Lou Vega. How are you today?
I'm doing well, good sir, doing well. Just getting through the day, just doing what we got to do, keep pushing forward, staying positive, just kind of trying to stay as positive as possible, I guess, right? That's the name of the game these days. Just staying
Right
positive, excited about everything that is going on in the space right now. Big shout out to everybody doing what they've got to do to make their moves and make their ways. So I'm excited about life in general on this great Martin Luther King Day. I know there's going to be a couple times we're going to touch on that, but let's always remember the plight and the fights that have been waged and won and still continue to fight to this day,
Yeah, I got something to say on that, but I want to introduce our other co-host, Miss Kristen Souza, in Kristen's corner over there, and she really is in the corner. How are you, Kristen?
Like truly just tucked in the back corner of my basement. I am good, Joe. How are you guys?
Get in the corner.
I know, right? It's like Dirty Dancing. No one puts Kristen in the corner.
Okay.
I am doing well. Very, very good. It's like you said, Martin Luther King Day, so that is fantastic. It is small human home from school day, so I've been hanging out with the little one, running around a little bit this morning. So all good stuff, kind of wrapping up the final phase of my store closing. So I got to carry some large IKEA glass cases out into the parking lot. I just want to thank the Lord that I didn't drop them and break them, because I'm not a strong gal.
You are a very strong gal. Don't you dare say that.
You know what?
All of this.
I lifted a 40-pound case.
You are a strong girl in many ways, and remember that. It
Appreciate
takes a strong person to make it through this life without medication. Anyway.
Yes.
All right. So, yes, you are correct. Today is Martin Luther King Day, and I'm especially feeling the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King today. I don't know why. It's always been a very important day in my life, because I'm probably one of the few people who are actually alive on the day he was shot. And I do remember that day very, very, very vividly, because I remember my mom listening to the radio and hearing the news, and she was crying. And I asked her, "Mommy, why are you crying?" And she said, "They killed Martin." And I said, "Why did they kill him? He was a good man." And she said, "Because bad people do bad things, and they kill good people. And that's how it is." And I'll never forget that. And today, this is a very important day to me today. And it strikes me very hard, because I listened to the whole speech today. And it seems today that people have forgotten the spirit of that speech and what it was really about, and the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King in their activism attempts and their attempts to change the system. Because he had it right. And I recommend that everybody goes out there today, find the full version of that speech and listen to it. And remember the spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King when you're trying to make change. And remember what he fought for and what he died for and what he was all about. And try and bring that into your hearts today, because we need it now more than ever. So with that,
Well
I just
said.
want to say thank you for tuning in. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristen. What's going on in your corner?
And this is a tough follow because that was very well said and absolutely correct. And I kind of, just before I get into my corner, to piggyback on that, listen to the whole speech. The
From
media,
start
those of
to
us,
finish.
everyone's got their favorite portion of the speech, but what comes before and after that are the more impactful parts. So don't just take the fluffy Instagram caption and post something. Listen to the whole thing. It's good. It's epic. Quite
It's
frankly.
worth your time.
Yes. So
And
with that, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna piggyback off what you were saying. You know, with that, take that and interpret your own message and saying that's gonna go along with how it makes you feel and what the things you're fighting for and your own individual beliefs and ideas. You know, and Joe made a huge point. You know, let's remember this is not something from another lifetime ago. This is not something that isn't relatable to individuals that are alive today. These things happened in our lifetime as a general hour. This has happened in our lifetime, and it's something that was not so far long ago in comparison to conversations, things that happened 200-300 years ago. But these are still things that affect us to this day. So these are still fights that are going on to this day. There are many individuals still fighting that same fight. So just because we are in the Northeast,
spirit.
We are in the Northeast, and it may be the area of steady habits, but we are, because of Connecticut, from the very beginning, we've had a little bit more freedoms and liberties than a lot of other places in this country that still to this day face so many prejudice and atrocities and low support, and still face those medical deserts and food deserts and, areas where there's not a medical center in 200-300 miles based solely on the demographic, So
100%.
It may not be a written law, but they still kind of enforce that systemic behaviors. So on that note, Kristen, take it away.
Take it away.
Well said. So as we all know, I do Kristen's Corner, and it's to highlight some of the cannabis adjacent and cannabis events coming up in the state over the next week. So there are a couple, and one that's not necessarily an event, but just something I wanted to mention. Our friend Lisa Capitani, she owns 9 Ledges LLC, and she is an endocannabinoid system nurse. She has released a new book on Amazon. It's called Mindful Metrics. I carry her first tracking journal in my store. It's very popular, and these are really great journals and books for folks that want to be mindful about their consumption. And, particularly for women of a certain age, they are hesitant to try cannabis. And so this kind of like a food journal, tracking it, seeing how you feel, how much you've consumed, it's tremendously helpful for breaking the stigma and getting folks to feel more comfortable with cannabis medicine. So I think everything Lisa does is fantastic. So I just wanted to mention that Lisa Capitani has her new book, Mindful Metrics, released on Amazon, and she'll be promoting that throughout the state. And
she'll be promoting it on the show next week.
She will.
There you go. So she'll be
perfect.
on the show next week. She'll tell us all about it.
Great. And then on the 20th, we have a couple events coming up. So again, over at Wholeness House, there is Cushion Cauldrons, their winter extravaganza. That is a great event. So you can hit up either Holly Broderick or Dr. Aaron Doolittle for information about that. But a really good time involving, mindfulness, just networking, collaboration, being around like-minded folks, really fun and educational events. And another one happening on the 20th is at Running Brook Farms in Killingworth. They will be premiering the documentary Harvesting Hope. So that is in collaboration with the Connecticut Hemp Industry Association. It's a documentary where they have interviewed various hemp farmers across Connecticut or folks that have hemp adjacent businesses. And this is a documentary that they've been working on for a few months that they're launching now to help aid in, various advocacy and legislative efforts. So they are having a premiere at Running Brook on the 20th. It is free and open to the public. So just reply via DM on their Instagram. You can go to Chia, CT Hemp Industry, or Running Brook Farm. There's a graphic. So very great time. I will be there.
Shout out to Becky up there. I love
on.
Running Brook Farms. If you do have a chance to go there, I would recommend it. It's a beautiful place. She really has a nice setup up there. So yeah, I would recommend going there.
Becky
and it's
and her
great
family
support for the hemp industry.
And even one step further from the hemp industry, just as a garden center, as a farm store, firewood by a family-owned business. They grow
Really nice.
tons of herbs as well outside of the hemp space. So they have lavender, witch hazel, chamomile. They grow all of them in-house. So your witchy herbs, your more holistic herbs. She does like 2 or 3 acres of just medicinal herbs outside of hemp as well. So really, really, really great people.
I am a big fan. I like Becky a whole lot. And the last one this week is Smokes and Jokes. So that's going to be on the 21st. So Smokes and Jokes, it's exactly what it is. It's a comedy show, cannabis friendly. That is being held. Oh, Josh, Joe, can you help me out? Where is that being held?
In New Haven somewhere. They can go and follow them on Instagram, Smokes and Jokes USA. Their location hasn't been announced yet.
Yeah, so we'll share some graphics in our stories on Greenhaven Media and also each of us individually. So Joe, myself, Lou, but definitely check that out. Very good time. And that is it for this week. We'll run events, week to week. So we've got some things coming up towards the end of the month and early February, and we'll drop those next week.
And always check our social media because we're constantly sharing and posting all of these events. So I see that our guest has joined us today. So I wanted to this is a very special day for us. It's probably one of the most highest profile guests we've had on the show, and I'm very excited to have this man on. So with us today, we have Mr. Montel Williams. So Mr. Montel earned his media celebrity status as an Emmy Award-winning television personality whom Americans invited into their homes for more than 17 years. Alongside his TV career, he's become an inspirational speaker, author, entrepreneur, and advocate for patients worldwide. At the height of his TV career in 1999, Williams experiences his first symptoms of MS, a sharp and 24-hour neuropathic pain in his feet and legs. When pharmaceuticals proved ineffective for pain management, his doctor recommended he try cannabis. Williams became an early advocate of cannabis law reform in the U.S. Back when he started as an advocate, patients were being dragged out of their homes in wheelchairs by the police for using cannabis to treat pain. And Williams was one of the few high-profile voices on Capitol Hill fighting for their rights. Over the past 2 decades, he has worked to pass cannabis legislation in key states and led the push for military veterans to access medical cannabis without the threat of losing benefits. And now he serves as founder of Lentive Scientific and the Montel by Select brand, while also hosting Let's Be Blunt podcast, which provides education and information on the cannabis industry. Welcome, Montel Williams. How are you today on this Martin Luther King Day? Oh, you got to unmute. There you are.
Excellent, sir. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Sure.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you for all your hard work in the cannabis industry and also within, the legalization factor. Thank you so much for being one of the early voices in this fight.
Well, yeah, way back when it was not vogue. I mean, let's go back to 2001. It wasn't vogue. I literally got castigated pretty much across the country for stepping out and talking about my cannabis use, but I could give a damn less what people thought about it. It was actually what was helping me deal with my symptoms and has helped me deal with my symptoms now for over 23 years and will continue to over the next 20 years. So, there were tough times back then, but I got to tell you something. I truthfully believe that, and part of my advocacy was the hope that we would be way further along than we are now. It seems so crazy that we are only where we are today, only because, as much as we like to blame and point fingers at the federal government for their slow adaptation and slow change in regulations, we need to point as many fingers, what's that old saying? When you point one finger this way, you got three pointing back. Well, there's three more pointing back at this industry for failing to do what we should have done all along the way, and that is truly advocate for patients' rights, for the ability for an individual to have access to efficacious medication. I agree with and believe in what we call adult use, but I think that we've really gone in the wrong direction when it comes to adult use because we act as if that's something similar to alcohol. It's not. I think people who gravitate to cannabis are gravitating to cannabis, whether they want to admit it or not, for an overwhelming and literally for a medical reason anyway, even if they won't admit it. The person who says, I smoke a little bit when I come over because I want to relax, well, that's because you want to relax. And it's helping you relax. Those who say I do it because it helps me sleep, that's sleep. That's a medical reason. That's not just adult use. So what we've really got to do now is, and hopefully, your voice and mine and those of others in this industry will finally step up to the plate and say, you know what, we haven't even scratched the surface when it comes to cannabis yet. We're like the Wright brothers pushing that wooden blade brown down a hill. We still got jets and wheels and other things to come. So why don't we all start working together, forget about the fact that we're all trying to individually buy a damn yacht and going out and work together, form a collaborative group that can help push forward and lobby to push the laws forward to get the government to say, just like, I don't know if you saw this article that came out this week, but, from the FDA themselves, our FDA has just written a letter to the DEA along with Health and Human Services. They wrote a letter actually acknowledging the fact that cannabis should be rescheduled now and should have been rescheduled years ago because we recognize it is not an addictive drug. It should not be put in the same category as heroin and LSD. This is a substance that has medicinal benefits. There are over 35,000 peer-reviewed published documents out already on cannabis, 3,500 coming every single year, talking about the value of not only the psychoactive version of cannabis, but also the non-psychoactive versions, where we're talking about all the minor cannabinoids, which we know now truly affect us as mammals. So I'm sorry, I'll go my soapbox, but I got to tell you, man,
keep going.
It's as much fault of the federal government for the reason why we are still where we are today. It's as much their fault as it is this industry's fault.
Absolutely, Montel. And you made so many good points in there. I don't know where to start, but I think the biggest one you made is that this is medicine. First and foremost, cannabis is medicine and always has been. Before they made it illegal, it was on the U.S. pharmacopoeia for over 100 years before, it was made illegal. And we can leave it at that unless you want to get into why it was made illegal.
But people need to understand that it was on the U.S. pharmacopoeia back 100 years before it was made illegal in 1937 because of the Marijuana Tax Act. And let's make sure people understand it wasn't made illegal because it was a Marijuana Drug Act. It was a Marijuana Tax Act because, there are guys like Charles DuPont and William Randolph Hearst, who realized that their industries were being so poorly affected by cannabis that they lobbied the federal government. They had the money to do so, and they said, let's just blame this all these darkies coming in the United States, and we can get rid of this. Well, the truth of the matter is, we got to go back 400 years. Let's go back to 1690, 1701, when, you know, back then you could pay your taxes to the federal government with hemp. Let's remember that America wasn't built on tobacco, cotton. America was built on hemp. And those who grew hemp knew the difference between hemp and what we call marijuana today, because back then they weren't worried about 0.3, you know,
percentage of THC.
That was an arbitrary number that was just somebody came up with for no dumbass reason whatsoever. So the truth of the matter is, back in the early days of America, you know, we recognized the value of this plant because, you know, the world had recognized the value of it. Every sail, every rope, every tent, every canvas that was on top of a wagon going west was all made from hemp. The only thing that the revolution, the Brits and the U.S. had in common during the Revolutionary War was hemp-based uniforms. The same thing that the North and the South had in common during the Civil War, hemp-based uniforms. The same thing that, you know, everybody who trashed our the Capitol during January 6th. A lot of cannabis was being smoked in those hallways down there. So we know that. So this is something that doesn't have a right or left. This has a middle, and that middle ground all Americans come in together on, and they agree that it is okay and should be okay for people to consume this product if they choose to.
Yes, couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more. And it's so well said. And I think what has happened is the focus now in this country has become the recreational aspect. The stigma came from the stonerism, the hippieism of it. When realistically, this plant, nobody even knew how to use it in that way until the federal government and those gentlemen you spoke of publicly announced that you could. Nobody in America, hardly anybody was using it that way. It was all medicine.
And, you know, but during the, you know, if we go back, you could, you know, I'll tell you a very funny one. Go to any library in America and go to the microfiche and take a look at any newspaper in this country back 1870, 1880, 1890, 1900. If you go back to the classifieds and you go back to, you know, the ads at the end, there are probably pages filled with tinctures and other medicinal agents to utilize cannabis with, because we recognized how much it made people feel better. And we knew that. And remember, we're coming out of a time, something called the Civil War, where we had more people injured in this country, walking around disfigured in this country than we have had any war since. And people needed something that brought them relief. And for us to then just summarily dismiss it and say, no, we're not going to let you use this anymore because those black and brown people do it, you know, really ignorant. And when we recognize that the rest of the world found value in cannabis, from the African continent to South America to Asia, but got forced into a corner by the United States and Europeans.
Exactly right.
Product that was interfering with textiles and the destruction of the big trees over there.
Yeah, we're talking countries that depended on hemp, that had been using cannabis for centuries, not only as medicine, but for industrial, and they got sucked in by the UN and forced a whole industry and a whole form of medicine taken away from them, their cultures that was deeply embedded in their cultures. It's a travesty. It's just like, I've always said that was one of the worst things when they made hemp illegal. It was one of the worst things that happened to humanity.
We all know that there's probably over 2,500 usages of hemp. Not just the consumer product, not just consumer products that we have for marijuana, but there are well over 2,500 usages. I mean, recently there are multiple companies that are now being publicly traded that have discerned that if you were to take the byproduct from even the legal human consumption market of hemp. You take the cellulose material, you take the leaves, you take the stems, the sticks, you can burn those into a graphene type material that has a greater electrical capability than graphite. So right now we know that we could make batteries out of the waste products that are used in a lot of cannabis and hemp production. We can make batteries out of that that are lighter and more efficient than even lithium. But, again, we keep fighting this because, we don't want to lose out on the tools that we have to incarcerate people.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the reasons. And of course, there's always the industry, capitalism, financial reasons by the people who are still in control of oil and textiles who really don't want to let go. And yes, exactly right. So it's still an uphill battle. And one of the things I've always said is, can you imagine where we would be now if this was not made illegal 80 years ago?
Okay. First off, they made it illegal. You couldn't even research it.
Yeah.
Couldn't even research it. We literally, if you remember, go back to the early 60s in the United States. We had a drug that was being actually distributed because they thought that it worked for morning sickness, pregnancy, sickness, postpartum. A drug that was called thalidomide.
Right.
And thalidomide made some of the most horrific birth defects the world had ever seen. And now, 20 years later, we researched that same drug that we had banned and realized that it has actual efficacious reasons for its use for other maladies and is now back in the cornucopia and back in the mainstream usage in America for certain other illnesses. Excuse me. Cannabis never, not one person in the history of cannabis use has ever died from cannabis use. They've died for other reasons associated with cannabis and not really associated with cannabis. I think one of the only cases in the United States that people have found that they try to attribute cannabis use to had nothing to do with the cannabis. It had to do with the fact that the person was smoking moldy cannabis. They were smoking a product that was so poorly produced that it was literally putting mold in their lungs, and that wasn't
killing them.
Killing them. It was the mold that was killing them, not the cannabis.
Right. Yeah, no, and there is no lethal dose for cannabis. The lethal dose for cannabis cannot be physically consumed.
Absolutely.
So
to Montel's point too, when you're pregnant, so when I was pregnant with my daughter, I was on some anti-seizure medications being treated for migraines, and I had doctors telling me this is going to be fine. Now, meanwhile, I'm doing my own research and it's telling me there's going to be birth defects and potentially all of these issues. This was approved. However, smoking cannabis put me at risk of dealing with the Department of Children and Families, which causes no birth defects that are known to man. So that was just a really good point, because the pharmaceutical industry will encourage things that are known to cause issues and then hesitate to encourage the use of cannabis, which has no known issues that we're aware of. There's some discrepancy with that maybe, but
if you bring up the pharmaceutical industry, I mean, what's really ridiculous is the fact that not only do they lie about what cannabis does, but they won't even teach the fact that cannabis is part of your genetic makeup. It is
your endocannabinoid.
You have an endocannabinoid system. That endocannabinoid system is antagonized by external hemp-based cannabis use. Only when I say antagonized or agonize, it literally stimulates the production of your own endocannabinoids, which is something called anandamide and 2-AG. Those two chemicals are chemicals that you as a human being, as a mammal, make. You produce those, and they have been produced since the dawn of man. So how you go to a medical school and not recognize that the one thing that all science has proven is responsible for your cellular homeostasis, they don't even teach this. But they're now starting to. Places like, Washington University, Harvard, Johns Hopkins, several colleges across the country are finally starting to teach the endocannabinoid system, recognizing the fact that in some cases it's because of a lack of certain endocannabinoids like anandamide, that certain maladies may be caused by that. there's research being done right now to see if this whole thing that we call autism and those spectrum diseases are because of a shortage of an antibody in your body.
Right. The endocannabinoid fatigue.
There you go.
Interesting.
Yes, it's been diagnosed, endocannabinoid fatigue. And imagine this, we acknowledged the endocannabinoid system, I believe it was 1992.
Well, let's go back even further
in
than
Israel.
Yeah, Dr. Shulam was researching, well, when he first started researching what are the active ingredients in cannabis, which I think started in as early as the 60s. The U.S. government started funding him in the 80s. He identified both THC and CBD. Then he identified that what cells in the body actually were receiving those. That's when the endocannabinoid system was discovered, and no one has refuted that ever since. And now we do know the fact that that is a secondary kind of, for lack of a better term, sympathetic nervous system that exists within us. All humans have it. It needs to be fed, but when we stop feeding it, 100 years ago, we started looking at a lot of onset of a lot of very types of autoimmune diseases that we had never seen before.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Very many. I know you and I are close to the same age, and I can totally see the difference in the amount of allergies, in the amount of autism, in the amount of different diseases that have happened, let's say since the 1980s, maybe, that weren't around when we were growing up. Let's just be real about that.
Yeah.
And that was the takeover of Big Pharma. So, all right. So here we are. And, Montel, one thing I did want to bring up, you are a big advocate for veterans' rights. And what most people don't realize is that you have a very long and decorated career in the military prior to your broadcasting career. And I want to acknowledge you and thank you for your service, and thank you for your work with the veterans, because that's a plight that a lot of people don't understand, the way that U.S. veterans are treated. And maybe you can enlighten me a little on this. Has any progress been made with the use of cannabis and them allowing it to be covered by VA? I mean, I know we were behind very much in that. Has any progress been made in that front?
The VA is not covering cost of that or anything, but at least the VA has issued a couple of I don't know what you would call them, and I'm speaking out of terms, I use the wrong term, but there are letters that have gone out that definitely allow veterans to utilize the product and not lose their VA benefits. So if a veteran goes in the hospital and he is tested and tests positive for cannabis, that won't automatically make him lose his benefits. That's the first step that we need.
There was a point when they were doing that. If a veteran got a medical card, they would lose their benefits. People need to understand that.
Right. But in states where the government has legally passed a medical marijuana legislation or a adult use legislation in a state, if you live in that legal state and you're a veteran, you have a right to utilize cannabis in that state and not lose your benefits. So at least that's the one thing that has moved forward, I think, of value. But, it's still hard to get, it's so funny, a lot of the senior leadership in the military don't even understand that, they don't understand the difference between THC and CBD, CBG, CBN, CBC, and all the other minor cannabinoids. They don't even take the time to try to figure that out. They just think that if it can't be a plant, it's got to be illegal, which is really ridiculous because they won't allow for sales of CBD products in military exchanges. They have banned and told soldiers and sailors and Coast Guardsmen and Marines and Air Force people that they're not allowed to use those products, which is really asinine because, we do know that CBC, CBG, CBN, CBD, CBDA are all minor cannabinoids that are of benefit to the human being or any mammal.
Right. Yeah. And now you discovered this in 1999 when you were diagnosed with MS, right? How did you, had you used it before? Yeah. I mean, how did I don't want to
Let's tell you the truth. I was on active duty in the military from 1974 through I was in the reserves for 2 years, from 1992 to 1996. So I didn't utilize cannabis at all back then because you got
Oh,
tested.
that's right. That's right.
And then I came back to it, but before that, I did, and I had the same effect that anybody in the early '70s had with cannabis.
Yeah.
I did it; it was okay, but I walked away from it because of my military service. But when I started, it was very weird. I started noticing when I started my show, I started kind of gravitating towards cannabis even before my diagnosis because I recognized that cannabis made me feel better. There were
Mm.
things going on in me that I could not explain. And it wasn't until I got my diagnosis that I finally realized why cannabis works so much because I was literally following the same path that our federal government has. I mean, most people don't know, even on your show. I bet you've got a lot of viewers who don't recognize that back as early as 1999, our government applied for, then in 2002, gave itself a patent. One of the first patents actually given out on cannabis was given to
That's
the
right.
patent number 6630507. That is a patent. If you look it up and read the abstract,
Right.
our government knew about cannabis back then. Why? Because we were the ones funding Meshulam's research in Israel. We knew the value of cannabis.
Exactly. And we had our own program. People don't realize that the US federal government had a small medical marijuana program. They would send you a canister of 100 joints per month, specific patients that they were studying. And it was grown in Alabama, right? University of Alabama or Mississippi?
And University of Mississippi. And
Right.
it wasn't so much that, if we go back when that program started under the first George Bush, and it was a compassionate care project because if you remember back at the time, HIV and
Right.
other things were taken off in America, and there was a large group of people who went down to Washington D.C. and said, this is a medication that works, and they said, yes, it does. We started growing it at the University of Mississippi, started delivering it. Still till today,
There's still one patient.
federal government has been distributing cannabis to some of those patients. It started off with 22. I think there's only 3 surviving members now, and they still get their cannabis every single month, and it can't be denied. That cannabis that they receive is literally a budget line in the annual budget that the federal government puts out. And how dare they sit back and say that they didn't believe that it worked? All you have to do is read the abstract yourself that the government applied for its own patent for, and it will tell you what the government believed that cannabis was capable of doing well over 20 years ago. And
Right.
so it's ridiculous that there has been this fight against cannabis at the federal level ever since. And every single year, every senator, every congressman in this country who votes on the annual budget votes to include that budget
That
line.
program, right.
So how dare you say that you can't use something that we authorize?
It's kind of hypocritical.
Yeah, not just kind of, but yeah, it's definitely
right. Right. But I mean, that's par for the course for the government. But let's fast forward to now. What made you get into the cannabis industry? You started out with a CBD company, correct?
Well, I have been in cannabis since really 2002. And I tried to launch my first brand back in 2010. I did so in 2011 in California. And my company's called Lenitive Scientific. And I have a product line out that's called Inspire by Montel. I got involved in California and ran into some situations where I wanted to get out of the relationship that I was involved with. So I stopped my line then. And then recently, I had done a podcast a couple of years back with a veteran who was out of Massachusetts who had his own company. And literally in that conversation, he said, Montel, you should be back in the business. I was like, maybe I should. And so I went and started with their company in Mass and put product lines back into the marketplace in Massachusetts. I'm about to launch my products in Georgia and hopefully a couple other states very soon. Why? I got tired of going to dispensaries and not finding products that I thought of any value, and finding products that really didn't answer the issues that I wanted to have answered. I've been utilizing a certain way before you heard terms like CBD, CBG, CBN, CBC. I was looking for minor cannabinoids back in 2002, 2003, long before it became vogue. And so recognize that some of the formulations that I had, there were other people who have utilized them that it elicited the same response in them that it did with me. And so therefore, why just have something that I could use for myself? I want to make sure I could share it with others. And I'm back in the space and proud to be a cannapreneur, and will stay that way for as long as I can.
Well, so just to make it clear, you pretty much formulate and came up with the different formulations for these vapes, right? They're vapes.
I have vapes out right now in Massachusetts. I'll have tinctures, gel caps, pills, topicals in Georgia. And hopefully we'll be able to put those together in multiple other states. I'm trying to expand my line in Mass. I will, hopefully within the next year, and do the same thing in several other states. And so I'm trying to get into Maryland, a couple other places. But yes, and I am the formulator. I formulate them and then turn those formulations over to a contract manufacturer who will make them to my specification.
Excellent.
They are THC, CBD, and other minor cannabinoids mixed together in the same vape carton with a proprietary terpene addition to them.
Oh, I think that's what a lot of people forget is, and you and I both smoked weed in the 70s, so we knew that was coming straight out of the ground. There was no crossbreeding. There was no changing the strain. And obviously it was a lot dirtier than what we smoke today, but it was a much more balanced cannabis, you could say, because it wasn't tampered with. So it had the original CBD to THC ratio, and I got to tell you, it was a different high. It was a different feeling.
Whole different experience back in the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s, early 80s. And then, of course, up in the northern Golden Triangle in America, we had too many growers up there trying to grow the minor cannabinoids out of the plant and try THC because they really didn't understand the value of the plant. And now we're starting to roll that back and get back into a place where, in lots of places around the country, you can find good, broad spectrum cannabis, which is really at the end of the day. But I mean, I will tell you, for me, I like to not only go with the broad spectrum of the original plant, but then go back and enhance it with other cannabinoids and other terpenes and raise those levels up a little bit more, because those are things that I found that have helped me, especially with things like spasticity, things like lock and other things that just by tweaking it just a little bit, but still using that broad spectrum, I'm able to elicit the responses that I want. So I have formulations that are out right now that are combinations of THC, CBD, THC, CBD, CBN, THC, CBD, CBG, CBN, THC, CBC, CBD, CBG. So, and each one of those formulations elicits a separate response.
Wow. Are these available? They're available in Massachusetts at the adult use dispensaries or medical use only?
They're available at both adult use and medical.
Wow. Well, I'm going to have to take a trip up there, but what would it take to get them down here? Obviously, we have legalized cannabis here in Connecticut. We have quite a few dispensaries. What would it take to get them here?
I'm trying to get there as quickly as I possibly can. I just got to find a contract manufacturer, a partner on the ground that's willing to work with me and put them in.
Oh, okay.
So that shameless plug. How's it going, Montel? I'm Luis. I'm one of the other co-hosts here. I'm a vertically integrated adult use and medical provider here in the state. We own a brand called company called Nautilus Botanicals. We are a medical and adult use cultivator, manufacturer, processor, as well as 2 dispensaries that will be opening up shortly. So we'll definitely make sure to touch base and be able to move forward with those things. We'd be able to help you with that.
Well, I'd love to, So, when we get off, I'll give you some information about who to reach out to in my office, and we'd love to come down and have a conversation about that. I'm trying to get in as many states as I possibly can get into as soon as I can, and the biggest part of that is that medicinal portion that
as we continue to say, no matter what, even in the adult use idea, that this is still a medicine. And we have to protect our patient rights, and those formulations help so much. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Patients are, they should be provided a choice and have an opportunity to look at and sample and try something. Because we do know that, with cannabis, when it comes to that, not one size actually fits all. My formulations, I have a energy, a calm, a chill, and a snooze right now in the mass area. And, you can combine those together. You can use a snooze. Like for me, I happen to use the energy most of the day. But then, as I get to the end of the evening or get to the latter part of the day, I like to come down a little bit and try to, not necessarily have a huge euphoria that's going to keep me awake and trying to solve the world's problem while I'm sleeping. I like to kind of fade into rest. And so, what I've formulated is a product that I call Snooze that has CBC, CBN, CBD, THC, at all equal components, so 25, 25, 25, plus a particular terpene formulation that I've added to that'll help elicit that response and help put you to sleep. I've got one that will just, calm you down when you come home from work. It's a product that, if I'm my energy is a big banger. I mean, it's a heavy hitter. It is by volume 95% THC, 5% CBD, and then extra terpenes on top. That little bit of CBD is just enough to take that edge off, so you don't get anxiety. You'll get the euphoria that you want. It'll take you to the moon if that's where you want to go. However, you won't be on the moon all jittery and nervous and all hyped out. No, it's a really nice, really, really smooth euphoria. Helps you function. One of the things I've noticed is that you take to it, you hit it pretty hard, you'll be cleaning your house, you'll be cleaning the car, you'll be running around doing more projects that you can even think of, and but at the same time not feel overly anxious. So that's why I add the CBD on the top, because it literally in that vape cart will help to just tampen down that anxiety.
Wow. Those are the type of things I used to do on my own. I'd have a CBD cart and a THC cart and go one after the other. It's great.
Yeah.
I have to say, I love that, because I've been smoking flower in, high THC, whatever, but I've been embarrassed to admit that lately it has been making me feel anxious and heart fluttery. And so finding either carts or mixing CBD with it, I have found helps tremendously. And, I'm all I've been smoking for a long time now. Where is this coming from? But our bodies change, our mindset changes. So that's huge.
Jump up the mass and look for Inspired by Montel, and I'll guarantee you I could take
Kristen, we're getting in the car this weekend.
I met you in Mass. I was one of probably a
dispensary owner in Mass. That's right over the border.
I accosted you the weekend, Montel. I have a picture with you.
Great. I'm glad you did. Thank you.
Very excited about that. That sounds like something I would use to go to the gym. That sounds like something I would completely use to push forward in my day as I'm meeting that midday hump, those type of things, as I'm trying to maintain a healthy lifestyle.
You stay on that till about 3 or 4 o'clock when you come home. Then you can change over and use either my Calm or my Chill. The Calm and the Chill are products that literally are 3 to 1 and 2 to 2. So it'll give you a nice, even buzz that won't be so overwhelming. You still get things done.
All right. I can't wait to try those. Lou, we got to get them down in Connecticut. All right, real quick, let's talk a little bit. We got about 5 minutes left. I want to talk a little bit about the podcast, Let's Be Blunt with Montel. When does it air? It's weekly, right?
It's weekly, and it's on all the streaming services that carry podcasts. I am proud of the fact that I think we've done well over 250 episodes to date. I've had everybody on there from Dr. Oz to Sanjay Gupta to senators and congressmen to you name it. All people who are stakeholders in the business and people who aren't stakeholders in the business that have come on to just discuss their either usage of or their advocacy for. And you can go up and take a look at the episodes and pick one, and I'll guarantee you'll enjoy it.
And what is the website? Let's Be Blunt.
Be Blunt with Montel.
Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Yeah, you have had some great guests. I checked out a few of the episodes. And what day do you release the new ones?
And I'm so sorry. I've got a producer who does all that hard, heavy lifting. I believe they're all released on Thursdays. The new ones are released on a Thursday.
So new episodes every Thursday. Let's Be Blunt with Montel. Yeah, no, that's great. Have you found the transition from TV to podcasting has been fairly easy? I mean, it's a lot different being your own boss than having a network. You can say what you want, right? First of all.
I guess I'd piggyback on that. And are you finding it enjoyable in this time in your life as you're traversing advocacy, business, your individual issues that are going on? Are you enjoying the podcast space?
I really do. I do two podcasts. I not only do Let's Be Blunt, but I also do one that is Free Thinking with Montel. I have guests come on and talk about a myriad of other things, and I enjoy it quite a bit. That was part of what I enjoyed the most about doing my talk show. I mean, over the course of 17 years, I spoke to about 32,000 different people on my show, and to do this in a podcast, I probably had well over 300 different guests on the show of 200 episodes. I get to meet people, get to share thoughts, and have them share their experiences with my, following, and people have really enjoyed it.
No, and it's great. I used to watch the show all the time. I was sorry when it went off the air, but I just real quick, as somebody who's in a broadcaster himself, what made you transition from the military to television?
That's a long story. We're probably right. However, back when I was in the military on active duty, I was in I was a special duty intelligence officer working with, some very specialized individuals who spent a lot of time at sea and spent time deployed, and got an opportunity to do some counseling and work with their families. That ended up turning into a little bit of a program where I started speaking around the country, spoke around the country for quite a long time on different issues. And that's really what kind of prompted the Montel Wimp Show. Speaking around the country, I was doing special television programming in different markets around the country. I did a lot of work with Gannett stations from Jacksonville, Florida, to Detroit, to Colorado. As a matter of fact, I did a show in Colorado that was called, I was doing presentations in schools where they used to preempt the entire broadcast for one channel and broadcast my presentations live to the community. That's where literally I had some people reach out and say, hey, you ought to think about, doing this in TV. And I was like, okay, whatever, let's try it. And then I ventured out to California, held some meetings, went on the air in May of 1991 and never looked back. 17 years later, our show was still running.
That's a great story, Montel. A great transition. All right, so we're almost out of time. Can you let people know how to get in touch with you, follow you, the best places they can find you on the web?
I'm one of the, I'm the worst person in the world when it comes to literally identifying, the streaming services. I know, excuse me, excuse me. You can get my podcast anywhere podcasts are shown. So I know I'm on all of those different streaming services for that. You can reach out to me at Montel, montelmedia.com.
Right,
and
that's it.
Anybody who wants information, go up there and you can find out how to get a hold of me and check out some of the stuff that I'm doing.
Yeah, and you are on all the social media platforms. I've followed you myself. And again, Montel, thank you for coming on. Thank you for your service to this country. Thank you. So your service to this country in so many ways and your service to this world. Thank you so much. You were one of the early pioneers, and us out here who are out there fighting the fight, let's call it. I'd rather say making the change.
That's right.
Making the change. We appreciate you as one of the groundbreaking guys who actually put his career on the line for this plan. I want people to realize that. Put his career on the line for this plan.
Well, before we take off, I want to let you know that I've been working on a project for the last now 12 years, but it's now really come completely to fruition. that is, you know, a lot of people don't understand that we are living in a nation right now that is suffering from a mental illness issue.
Yes.
One that is really centered around PTSD. We have so many people in this country who are survivors of COVID, who spent 2 days in the hospital, who are walking around traumatized. We have people who are traumatized in this country who have served our country as in the fighting force. But I've been working on a project for now years that is now acknowledged and recognized by the governing bodies that actually validate psychological protocols. An organization called the ISTSS that has validated a project that I've been working on. It's called RTM, Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories, which is really one of the most efficacious treatments for PTSD that exists in the world today. It is available right now to anybody. It can actually be administered virtually, and it is 90% efficacious. So if there are people who are, you know, suffering from PTSD out there that watch your podcast, I know that in some ways, some people turn to cannabis as a way to deal. RTM can literally ameliorate 100% of the symptoms in as little as 5 to 10 hours without any medication whatsoever. So I keep talking about it, and when people spread the word and let them know that if you know of a person who is suffering from PTSD, you yourself have PTSD, this is something that can help you get beyond that in as little as 5 to 10 hours.
You know what? We got 30 seconds left, and I would really love to address that one there. Montel, there's a lot of things. I'm Puerto Rican, grew up in East New York, Brooklyn, and we watched you as a kid. And this is what you're mentioning right now. That's something that the childhood traumas that kind of push us towards, you know, it's a huge factor, and I'd love to talk about it more going forward.
Let's do that.
Yeah.
So this is the only treatment protocol for PTSD that works for all forms of PTSD, not just combat PTSD, childhood trauma, sexual abuse, spousal abuse, you name it, it works.
All right.
We appreciate that.
Can we reach out and get more information so we can help you promote that and spread the word? I will reach out to Melanie over there and get all the information, not only about that, but about the vapes as well. And we would love to help you promote that in any way possible. And I'm getting the word from our producer to say goodbye. Montel, any last words before we go?
No matter what your journey in life, just stay true to who you are. Make sure that every day you wake up with a sense of purpose. Understand that we all can make a difference in everyone's life if we just think bigger than ourselves.
Thank you, Montel. Thank you for coming on today. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We love you all. Remember, love will always triumph over hate. Say goodbye, everybody. Any last words, Uncle Lou?
Stay happy, healthy, and high, my friends.
Kristen.
Thank you so much. This was great.
All right.